University of Pennsylvania professor Joseph Turow is the author of The Daily You, How the New Advertising Industry is Defining Your Identity and Your Worth. Professor Turow, who is Nicholas Negroponte?
Nicholas Negroponte was a professor at MIT who came up with the idea of the Daily Me. The idea of the Daily Me is that we will all get newspapers conditioned to what we care about because we will make the decisions about what is on the paper. The difference between that and the Daily You is the notion that a lot of what goes on under the hood of the web is not conditioned by us. It's created as a result of a whole lot of activities by marketers that we don't even see or know about. And relating to a transformation in advertising that almost anyone except people in the advertising industry doesn't know about.
What does that mean?
In the last 20 years, advertising has changed drastically with the rise of cable and then the internet. Originally, advertising was making an ad, a commercial, and then putting it on just a few very popular media, newspapers, television, radio, magazines. With the rise of cable, all of a sudden you had hundreds of channels. And then with the internet, it's infinite. But more so, you have digital stuff, and it becomes interactive. And apart from what we know about, which is that we can talk back to the advertiser, we can click on something, there's a whole lot of stuff going on under the hood where data are taken from us, are used, and we become creatures that are created by the advertisers to understand us and then change what we see on the web very often. This is going to happen more and more as we move forward based upon what they think they know about us.
But they do know about us, don't they? From our use of smartphones and searches, et cetera?
Exactly. They know, but a lot of times it's inaccurate in the sense of we put a lot of droppings around the web that may have nothing to do with what we really think we are. Maybe we don't agree with what we've said somewhere, and some advertisers picked it up and say, well, you're intending to buy X. Maybe you have a brother who took your name or your password somewhere, but that's irrelevant because all this stuff comes together and becomes a rich soup that increasingly, as we move forward into the 21st century, is going to be the soup that defines us, if that's not a mixed metaphor.
So has advertising become more effective?
No one knows. It's certainly spending a lot of money, but nobody really knows whether it's becoming more effective. I don't care. Okay, I'm not interested in effectiveness of advertising. That's not what the book is about. Though a lot of people who are from the ad industry read it and they tell me they're learning a lot, which I like. But the fact is that I'm more interested in the social implications of this. What happens when we as a society begin to define ourselves? That is, companies begin to define us. Television commercials begin to define us based upon ideas about us that advertisers and marketers know, but about which we have no clue. And what I try to do in the book is explain how that's happening and show the trajectory. Where is it going and why?
And where is it going?
It's going to a point where down the line we may well live in very different reputation worlds than our neighbors. It may be that you'll get a Kay's jewelry ad and I'll get a Tiffany ad because they think I can buy or want to buy more expensive jewelry than you. I may get different headlines from you based upon ideas that companies have about will I click on the ads if I have optimistic headlines versus pessimistic headlines. I may get different baby carriage ads. I may get different ads for gyms based upon how fat they think I am, based upon 50 different characteristics that designate whether I'm heavy or not, rather than the guy's a fatso. Okay? So there are lots of things that are going on, not least of which relate to politics. Because if we look at the Obama campaign recently, particularly Obama, used amazingly, for today's world, sophisticated ways of deciding who's going to vote for what, when, where, and like that.
So, Professor Turow, looking 10 years from now, are we going to look back, or even 20 years, are we going to look back at the Obama campaign and laugh at how simplistic?
Yes, I believe that's true. We'll say this was a watershed, but compared to what's going on now, we say in 2020, that was baby steps. The kinds of things that people will be able to do with our data, we can't imagine right now, or we can, but it will seem silly. And the real interesting question is, if it's political, can they do stuff that even the government will say is not acceptable for regular marketers? In other words, political speech. Does data marketing for politics, is that considered political speech and so is off limits to any kind of regulation? That's a question we haven't resolved yet.
So what are the privacy implications of the
Well, we've
daily
just been talking about it. It just depends on what you mean by privacy. The real interesting question is Americans have a really hard time grappling with the notion of privacy because it's very tough to understand what's happening. If you go to a site and it says you can disable the cookies, but if you disable the cookies, you may not have the optimal use of the site, what are you going to do? The privacy policies are impossible to read, and generally, even if you read them, it's what I call a tough luck privacy policy. You can't do anything about it anyway. And there are very few places that allow you to negotiate with them. How about you don't take this data? Maybe I'll let you take that data. We don't have that yet. In Europe, they're getting more particularistic about this and more careful. Eventually, I argue what we should really realize is what this is about is dignity, respect, information respect. And we haven't gotten, and marketers certainly haven't gotten their heads around collectively the idea that it's really important to respect people's information as we respect people in our everyday lives.
So who are the new madmen of the 21st century?
Good question. The statisticians, the computer modelers. That's the future in advertising. See, it used to be the people who wrote the ads, and they still, I mean, they get angry when I say this, but the real center of power in advertising is moving toward media buying, which is the idea of choosing what kinds of channels to reach people with, and then the people who create the software around media buyers that define you and me and decide whether we should get this offer, this coupon, and not that one.
And we've been talking on Book TV with Joseph Turow, who is a professor at the University of Pennsylvania. Here's his most recent book, The Daily You: How the New Advertising Industry is Defining Your Identity and Your Worth.